Our next luncheon presentation is going to be your armchair conversation with Jonathan Granoff from the Global Security Institute and Amory Lovins from our own Rocky Mountain Institute. I met Amory years ago when David Brower, the great David Brower, who built the Sierra Club, who fought the damming of the Grand Canyon, and then started Friends of the Earth and subsequently Earth Island Institute. And it's been a great friendship to have over the years. We're always entertained by his own global interview, his command of the facts, and the simple, profound common sense. But we're also happy to have Jonathan Granoff here today with the Global Security Institute, because the subject of this session is in fact nuclear security, realism or myth, and imagination. And I'm just going to let these guys jump right into it. So gentlemen, go at it and tell us the truth.
Well, Jonathan asked me very graciously to kick off. So let me start with fundamentals like what is security? The best definition I found working on this the past 40-odd years is freedom from fear of privation or attack. Freedom from fear of privation or attack. You notice this is not about how many weapons we have. In fact, there is no significant military threat to the United States that can be defended against. There is no effective defense against an onslaught of ICBMs or various other modes of attack. In fact, you don't need ICBMs. Warheads can be delivered by container ship wrapped in bales of marijuana. Nobody would ever notice. And then there's no radar track marking their origin for retaliation, so deterrence doesn't really work against anonymous attacks. But that lack of significant military threats to our country that can be defended against, partly because of geography, we're not worried about armadas of Chinese and rowboats, really makes you wonder whether there's another way to think about security. Could we be safe and feel safe in ways that work better and cost less than present arrangements, that are bottom up, not top down, that are the province of every citizen, not the monopoly of national governments, that don't rely on the threat or use of violence, and that make others more secure, not less, whether on the scale of the village or the globe? I think there is such an approach. My colleagues Mike Schumann, Hal Harvey, Dan Arbus worked it out actually at Rocky Mountain Institute a couple of decades ago in a book called Security Without War. And it suggests a two-pronged approach, freedom from fear of privation and of attack. They're both important and they interact. Freedom from fear of privation is kind of obvious how to do that. We're spending, last I looked, which is a little out of date, $11,000 a second on the world's finest military, and it's not really making us secure. On the other hand, it would cost about $40 billion a year, which is a rounding error in many of our military budgets, to give everybody on Earth the basics of a decent life, basic healthcare, sanitation, clean water, adequate food, and education and opportunity. So really, George Marshall got it right. 1947, the year I was born, he said, there can be no political stability and no assured peace without economic security. So he said, U.S. policy must be directed not against any country or doctrine, but against hunger, poverty, desperation, and chaos. He was right 66 years ago, and he's right now. Now, freedom from fear of attack, which I think is mainly what Jonathan will focus on, is more complicated, but there's a three-part approach to that that seems to make sense and probably makes money. And that is to integrate conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and non-provocative defense. Conflict prevention should be as normal as fire prevention. We learned way too late that in Bosnia we could have headed off the bloodshed by just jamming Milosevic's radio station. It was more complicated than that, but there's a strong element of truth in that. And actually, we're getting a lot better at conflict prevention now. One important part of it is leader control, so that crazy leaders can't go to war as a distraction or just because of some nutty impulse they have. So the better we get around the world at freedom of expression and very rich communication, as through social media, the less likely it is that governments can do foolish things. In fact, the better we know what our governments are up to, the more transparency we have, the more accountability we have in any society. It takes different forms in different places. The less likely it is that some of the national hysterias of the past will be repeated. I was mentioning earlier to Jonathan when an old friend of mine was vice president of the Soviet Academy of Sciences, academician Velikhov, and somebody once asked him, well, now we got these modems and photocopiers coming into the Soviet Union. How will your government keep control? And he said, you don't understand. This is our secret weapon to ensure that the reforms of perestroika will be irreversible. And over time, he may well be right. They certainly had a good shot at it. Now, conflict resolution I won't spend any time on. It's just the realm of improved international laws, norms, and institutions, when Jonathan's one of the leading experts on that in the world. But the third element is often overlooked, and that's non-provocative defense that can reliably defeat aggression and certainly deter aggression, but without making others feel less secure. So you notice this is a three-layered approach. You try to prevent conflict in the first place. If that doesn't work, you try to resolve it peacefully. If that doesn't work, you still have non-provocative defense, which can be military or non-military. There's a whole spectrum. And on the one end of the spectrum is the Gene Sharp's nonviolent sanctions, which about a third or a half the time, as I recall, even defeated the Nazi SS. People just wouldn't cooperate in ways they found very hard to deal with. And if the country is set up in advance to be ungovernable and you wouldn't want to be there and you just want to go home and nothing works, you have much less incentive to invade it. This was worked out, by the way, by the children of resistance fighters in World War II, and it is an important element of doctrinal discussions in Europe, because they said, gee, if our parents had had their resistance worked out ahead of time, it would have worked even better. And then on the other end, there's the Swiss approach of a paramilitarized society and an anti-tank rocket behind every bush. And both of those are pretty good deterrents. This has been worked out in great detail by the German command as how to defend a country where the villages are less than a kiloton apart. And you couldn't possibly defend the country by conventional means and still have anything left. But non-provocative defense means that you have forces of short range, low concentration of value, low vulnerability, and dependence on local support. In other words, they have very limited offensive capability. You can see by looking at their structure and posture that their intent is defensive, defending your own territory. And they're even, by the way, nonviolent defensive weapons. Like there have been serious suggestions of burying a pipeline along what was then the boundary between East and West Germany And if tanks started rolling toward it from either direction, you just fill it with slurry explosive, blow it up, make a huge tank trap, V-shaped trench. Nobody could get across it for a long time. There are slime bombs, goo bombs. We've been slimed. Our tank can't go anywhere. It's too slippery, or maybe the treads are all stuck together. You got to get out and walk home. Anyway, there's a large spectrum of technical and societal means for defending your society other than blowing up the other force. And this brings me to my last remark about, despite all these available means, are having a paradox at the heart of our strategic doctrine right now, because we have the very opposite of non-provocative defense. We have forces designed to go anywhere in the world within 24 hours. This, of course, impugns any claim of defensive intent. We have structured and postured our forces to be the world's policeman, and I don't mean the friendly neighborhood cop walking the beat. This is the global SWAT team, and I get to see it up close as an advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations. I hasten to add, the views I express here are in no way those of the Navy or the Department of Defense. These are my personal views. So we can say that, of course, our intent is to be a benign policeman, and perhaps it is. We can all argue politically about how that's worked out so far and how good the safeguards are. Nonetheless, we cannot have a doctrine based on the new strategic triad, I would call it, of conflict prevention and resolution and non-provocative defense if our forces are the very opposite of non-provocative. They don't make other people feel more secure. They make many people feel less secure. Just imagine, though, that, let's say, take one adversary, Russia, often presented, that neither they nor we had offensive forces. No long-range bombers, no intercontinental missiles, no ballistic missile submarines. We just had short-range defense aircraft. And this is, in fact, the doctrine Sweden has largely adopted. They have capable aircraft with very short legs. I'm told that their coastal gun batteries cannot be elevated to fire beyond their coastal waters. For a long time they had, maybe they still have, radios with their own frequency that can't talk to NATO or Warsaw Pact, so they have to be neutral. Every way they can think of technically, they have said, don't try to mess with us, but we won't attack you. We can't. Our forces aren't designed for that. That would be a much more peaceful and stable world. So perhaps that's a lead-in to where you're headed with an even bigger view.
Thank you, Amory. As usual, I agree with everything he said. But I just want to take a picture of where we are right now. The 30 Years' War, in which Protestants and Catholics a few generations ago were decimating Europe, was resolved by the Council of Westphalia, which moved the world from city-states to the nation-state. The United Nations system attempted to move us from a adversarial posture of nation-states to an international system based on preventing war and the rule of law. But we're not quite there. We're not even close in many ways. The current posture that we have right now is 96% of the world's nuclear arsenals are in the hands of two countries. There's over 16,000 nuclear weapons. Most of them dramatically dwarf the destructive capacity of Hiroshima. Hiroshima was a mere 15 kilotons. That's like 15,000 tons of TNT. Most of the weapons in our arsenal are like 340, 350 kilotons, and some in the megaton range, which is 1 million tons of TNT. It simply dwarfs the human imagination, the destructive capacity of these weapons. The international physicians for the prevention of nuclear war recently came out with a report that if a mere 100 of these went off, that the climate of the planet for at least a decade would go down for a degree to a degree and a half Celsius, starving billions of people, rendering civilization chaotic beyond measure. That's just 100. And every day, they are on hair trigger alert, use them or lose them status. Now, the ideas behind this are extremely important. The idea behind this is that security can be obtained by a doctrine called strategic stability. Strategic stability is based on the premise that you have a mutual conviction that the retaliatory force of another country would be so much that you would never attack them first. So countries pursue a balance of terror. And that has not fundamentally changed since the end of the Cold War. What has fundamentally changed is that this doctrine has become contagious. So during the Cold War, the doctrine was applied to the United States and Russia, and it was called arms control. And we tried to match our respective arsenals and continue to, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we had 13 days when the world hung in balance, and we started a series of arms control measures to try and keep a state of balance. But this doctrine has become contagious, and the dangers have spread. India and Pakistan are applying the same doctrine. But we had 13 days in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they have about 300 seconds should some hacker create the appearance of an attack by one of their adversary countries. And if they were to have an exchange, we would all be downwind. So we are all subject to the reliability, the rationality, the stability of the command and control between India and Pakistan as we sit here today. I don't consider this to be realistic. I think it's very irresponsible. Knowing all of the near accidents that have taken place between the United States and the Soviet Union and Russia, knowing the 100 missileers that had to be dismissed a few months ago for cheating on their exams, knowing that in 2003, a French and a British nuclear submarines collided with each other in the North Sea, knowing that complexity breeds, increasing complexity breeds unpredictability, knowing that there were numerous instances when computers appeared to have registered full-scale Soviet launches against us and vice versa, and it was only good luck that got us to where we are today. But it's mainly the ideas behind it, because the ideas behind it generate massive amounts of economic expenditures that are counterproductive to the goal of security. The United States alone is scheduled to expend in excess of $650 billion in the next decade to modernize and perfect and keep it ready our nuclear arsenal. And this stimulates others to do the same. But the cost of the money, I believe, is dwarfed by, rather, the opportunity costs that it presents. Because in today's world, there are real, some existential, but many critically important global threats that simply cannot be effectively addressed without cooperation. And I'll list just a few. Climate, the pH of the oceans, the rainforests, the lungs of the planet, cybersecurity, pandemic diseases, as if Ebola has a passport, terrorism, financial stability of financial markets. All of these phenomena require new levels of global cooperation. And a nuclear apartheid world in which 9 countries claim that their security is so important that they alone can have these weapons, the 9 countries being North Korea has less than 10, You get an idea here. North Korea has less than 10. Israel has about 80. India about 110. Pakistan about 120. The United Kingdom about 225. China about 250. France about 300. The United States about 7,300. And Russia about 8,600. That the level of cooperation needed in a nuclear apartheid world will simply not be forthcoming. And that means increasing tensions, increasing inability to deal with these real threats. India and Pakistan, let's just take this simple one. We know that water is going to be a critical problem in the future. And we know that while they're squaring off with nuclear weapons, it's unlikely that they will ever cooperate effectively on that. But we know that they can't solve the problem together because India did not get its nuclear weapons because of Pakistan. It got them because of China. And China did not get them because of India. They got them because of Russia. And Russia got them because we got them. And we got them because we were afraid Adolf Hitler was going to get them. So the only solution to the problem is the holistic global solution that India has actually put forward, which is a global treaty banning nuclear weapons. I think that something that's really needed is a sober, mature discussion amongst the serious people of the planet, both civil society and government, defining where are our interests today, foursquare, that's a lawyer's term for contracts, foursquare aligned, where our interests are really aligned. And I would say that our interests really line up together in protecting the oceans. Because if one country can dump, everyone can dump through their flag. So you need to have global cooperation. And every one of these major phenomena of globalization will be enhanced by addressing them cooperatively. And that cooperation is not going to happen in a nuclear apartheid world. It is also empirically verifiable, this approach to security we're suggesting. You can measure progress on the climate. You can measure progress on the oceans. You can measure addressing poverty. You can measure controlling diseases. But the doctrine we have now is immeasurable. There's no measurements for it. It's working because we're not at war. Well, you can never measure progress. And those of us who argue for the elimination of nuclear weapons to fulfill our legal duty to do it, we're faced with another argument. They say we can manage the risk, we can manage the risk. And then we argue, oh, the risk is so high, the risk is insurmountable because it increases, and look at all the near misses we've had. The sensing device in a satellite that saw a sunrise as a full-scale launch coming from Russia, or the computers in Russia that evidenced a full-scale American launch, or the weather satellite that went up the coast of Norway that was mistaken for a Trident launch in 1995, and Boris Yeltsin had 8 minutes to decide what to do. Thank God he wasn't drunk. But we lose the argument consistently because our adversaries come forward and say, we need the weapon for an unforeseeable threat. You can never overcome that argument because by definition, if you start to say, here's the threat, here's another approach, that's foreseeable. So you can never overcome it because it's based on irrationality of fear. What I think we're hearing from speaker after speaker here is that we need to find a way of defining success empirically, a healthy climate, a healthy oceans, healthy biodiversity. These are measurable. These are realistic. But what I think is really wonderful is that not only are these realistic, and realism means something. It should mean it has something to do with reality. Whereas our adversaries are arguing that they're the realists, that it is inevitable that nations will operate in a Hobbesian world of perpetual adversity, hatred, and fear. It's not realistic. It doesn't work. But what is interesting is, and exactly as Amory pointed out, what worked was the Marshall Plan. Not only was it practical, but it was consistent with our human values and our morality. It was consistent with our higher values. And that's what the world needs more than anything. It needs a definition of what is it to be a human community. It means that we are all equal under the law. It means we are all equal as human beings. It means that we are all part of the web of life. That is the moral vision that is consistent with our humanity. And this is a moment in history where it is so obvious that the moral vision and the practical vision are completely harmonious. And that has not been put forward. What do we have? We have, imagine if the Biological Weapons Convention said, no nation can use smallpox or polio as a weapon, but we'll let 9 countries use the plague as a weapon to maintain international security. We would say that's absurd. It's unstable. It's immoral. It won't work. And we'd be right. That's precisely what we have with nuclear weapons. 9 countries claiming this special privilege. Well, we are people aware of this, and we are each focused on a particular aspect of what is a global phenomena, the climate. But I would say that in the way physicians 30 years ago would only, if you went with a stomach ache, they'd look at your stomach. That would be it. Take a pill. Now, any decent physician looks at the situation holistically. How's your life? How's your love life? How's your family? How's your job? Let me see your skin, your tongue. Still treating your stomach, but looking at you holistically. We need to approach security holistically. Each of us with our particular discipline, but we should be all working on the acupuncture point of the elimination of nuclear weapons. Yes,
I think we have about 1 minute, so
we'll go over.
Let me try to wrap this up by bringing it to the climate and energy discussion. I had a paper in Foreign Policy a few years ago pointing out that even though the oil and climate and proliferation problems are talked about in different languages by different communities under different theories, we're really all soluble by the same means, which happen to be profitable, namely energy efficiency and renewables. So imagine, for example, how much less potential for conflict we would have in the Middle East and the South China Sea and a bunch of other places if nobody needed oil. Well, getting off oil costs about 25 bucks a barrel, which is about a quarter of what we pay for it right now. See Reinventing Fire for details. Imagine how many tyrants and terrorists we would defund by not buying the oil. You know, think about a lot of bad folks in the world right now. Where does their money come from? Oil. We pay it at the pump every day, except those of us who don't go to the pump anymore. I'm probably the only member of the National Petroleum Council with an electric car license plate that says off oil. Then, of course, the same thing solved the climate problem, not at a cost, but at a profit. So I think the only thing Jonathan said I might disagree with is the need for international cooperation and treaties, which are always a good thing, I guess, to solve the climate problem, because actually you don't need a treaty to get countries to do what's in their economic self-interest, and saving the fuel is cheaper than buying it, let alone burning it. But I want to end just on the non-proliferation question, because of course we and other countries, even though we've never made money doing so, continue to try to export do-it-yourself bomb kits, particularly to the Middle East these days, which is one of the stupidest things we ever thought of, in the guise of nuclear power programs for which there's not a business case. Well, imagine a world in which we actually take economics seriously. We choose the best energy buys first. And therefore, all of the technologies, skills, equipment, ingredients, materials, and innocent-looking civilian cover, by the way, everything you need to build bombs would no longer be ordinary items of commerce. That wouldn't make them impossible to get, but they'd be a lot harder to get, more conspicuous to try to get, and politically very much costlier to be caught trying to get, because there would be no doubt what you were up to was making bombs, not kilowatt hours. And I think that would make it a lot more difficult for all the nth countries one normally thinks about. So next time you see these public debates about energy policy, just remember the connection between the civil and military atom, and that we can undo it by picking the best energy buys first. Thank you.
Maybe.
I think
Can I have a question? Can I ask a question or make a comment, or is it over?
John?
Do we have time?
Well, we're going to have to, yeah.
Well, so we're talking about global security and nuclear weapons. So every American president has wanted to move us toward a pledge that we took in 1968 to move toward general, complete nuclear disarmament. Now, why hasn't it worked? We put a lot of non-proliferation efforts in place. We signed a non-proliferation treaty. But the simple truth is that other nations seek nuclear weapons, not to imitate us, but because nuclear weapons actually work in forestalling conflict. The danger is that they may not work. They create a risk of terrorist theft. They're horribly expensive. They're incredibly hazardous. Nobody likes to mess with them, but they have been retained. I'll give you a couple of examples here. Today there's fighting in Ukraine. Now this Ukraine fighting follows a very clear pattern of exercises conducted by Russia over the last 4 years. And the way Russia does the exercises, their exercise called Zapad, they normally start with trouble. Russia is provoked. Russia reacts, NATO counterreacts, and Russia ends the struggle with NATO by doing what? Firing a nuclear weapon at the United States. This is the end of the exercise. It's still being done in Russian exercises. China recently announced that it had modernized its nuclear capacity and was now capable of striking the United States. So I want to just say that this is an important discussion. It's worth lots more time than a casual lunchtime conversation. And there's no lack of effort that's gone into trying to improve the nuclear non-proliferation treaty or deal with ways to reduce nuclear arsenals. Sad truth is that we haven't succeeded very well. It's no reason not to continue to try. I think we should all be pleased that Jonathan and Amory are up here talking about it, but it's not an easy process in a world that's riven by conflict. The North Koreans knew when we went after Iraq in 2003 that they absolutely had to have a nuclear weapon, and so did the Iranians, because that nuclear weapon capacity gives them some measure of security. So there's logic on the other side of this. As ugly as it is, as distasteful as nuclear weapons are, I never met a military guy who liked them, but there's a policy problem, and there's no point in washing it away in a lunchtime discussion. It's a significant issue, and if we want to discuss it, we should devote enough time to discuss it on all sides of the issue adequately. Thank you.
General, I totally agree with you that our time with it is not commensurate with the importance of it. But I would point out that Ronald Reagan was our strongest advocate for the elimination of nuclear weapons and came quite close to doing it with Mikhail Gorbachev at Reykjavik. But right now, the policy that we have is that we want to try and get there by the incremental steps of a test ban treaty, a cutoff on the production of fissile material, and deeper cuts. And as you know, the current political posture in the United States is we're not going to have entry into force of the test ban treaty because of our toxicity of our domestic policies. New hostility with the United States and Russia, we're not going to have further cuts. So the promises we've made toward incremental steps under the NPT have been thwarted. On the other hand, there's another dynamic going on in the world outside of America, in which over 130 countries have supported the Secretary General's call for a convention banning nuclear weapons, treating nuclear weapons in the same way as biological and chemical weapons have been treated. Now, I agree with you that in the world today, if you simply remove nuclear weapons, it would probably be very destabilizing. What most of us are contending is that when you see the dangers, that it should be compelling enough for us to change the paradigm of how we pursue security generally and find more avenues to redefine our security based on our actual realistic common interests. And that discussion I would very much like to see as a conference in and of itself. How do we change the way in which we look at security so that we're no longer living in the city-state mentality?